It is 3:01. Let's get started. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to those who were joining us earlier on our first session and is back here for our legacy program, and those of you who are jumping on for the first time this afternoon for the legacy programs. Welcome to HCD's 2025 Schedule of Rental Income Workshop. For those of you, again, who are now joining, I'm Joanna Nguyen. I'm the Section Chief overseeing the Asset Management Compliance Occupancy section. We're going to begin our second session of the workshop, and part of this afternoon will focus on our legacy programs such as the RHCP bond, CHRP, as well as LPR. Presentations. I'd like to introduce our team, whom you'll hear from in a couple minutes here. Our program manager, Van Nguyen, our specialists, George Rodine, Catherine Jones, Tina Johnson, who was in our first session, and then Jonathan Lockwood, who was also in our first session as well. As I mentioned, in our first session, we have recently completed our 2024 site monitoring visits, and as we prepare for the 2025 schedule of rental income submittals, our goal for today's workshop is to share the updates and the changes and highlights that we've made to the SRI, which also incorporated suggestions from our sponsors that have from your feedback, and we definitely value, and we've incorporated it here. We continue to develop the consolidated SRI form for all of HCD's programs to assist with your reporting, and currently we have 30 plus programs. So we'll walk you through the process of completing the SRI from the perspective of a sponsor with the various programs through a live demonstration. So thank you again for joining us. If this is your second session here with us, good to see you back. And for those of you who are now joining us, good to see you. And I will turn this over to our senior specialist, George Rodine, and he'll start our workshop out with walking you through the updates and changes and highlights of our SRI.
Okay, hello everybody. My name's George Rodine. I'm the developer of the SRI workbook, and I'm grateful to be able to participate in the SRI webinar this afternoon. I wanted to go over the give an overview of the workbook and some of the recent changes and enhancements that we've made. And so the workbook, like Joanna said, it covers about 30 HCD funded programs. Years ago, we combined 5 different occupancy schedules into one workbook and one occupancy report, so that customers and staff would only need to learn and submit one form. So some of the recent changes. One of the major recent changes was driven by making the form more ADA compliant. And so there was a lot of reformatting that needed to be done. We eliminated radio buttons and added drop-down selections. We added data validation. As you see, when you click on a cell, there's instructions that pop up. So we've kind of modified and changed cell comments into data validation for ADA purposes to try to get it more ADA compliant. I've updated the macros regarding the row and column worksheet hiding and unhiding. And then I've added a macro to prevent users from copying and pasting data into this workbook. The copying and pasting results in the file getting corrupted and a lot of errors. And so you can copy and paste values, use that function if you're able to, or copy and paste into the formula bar up on the very top. But copying and pasting is not allowed, and you'll get an error message if you try to do that. So one of the reasons we have different versions throughout the year is that HUD publishes and the data for the income and rent limits come out at different times. Typically, and not always, a lot of the income limits are published on April 1st, and others are published in May, and then our CPI data comes out sometime in June, because it's a May to May change in the CPI that we're looking at for rent increases. And so as soon as this data is published, I've gone in and I've tried to make updates so that the update at least contains the most recent income limit data. And so there are different versions. Work with your rep if you're confused on which version needs to be submitted, but we always encourage you to go to our website and download the most recent file. So some of the changes that we've made here include, again, the income and rent limits were all updated for the MHP, the MTSP or TCAC income and rent limits, the state median income limits, the home income and rent limits, HCD's policy division's official state income limits, the HLCP county rent limits for existing units. There's a calculation in there that's built so that you can calculate rent limits for existing units for the HLCP program. And then the PRP and LPR rent limits were added into this. And then we have the consumer price index that impacts the FHDP program, the RHCP program, the CHIRP, SARA, SERP, CalDAP, and DPRLP. So those are some of the limit updates. On the worksheet 1, we have updates that are kind of highlighted in purple here. Again, we have the website on where to get the form. That address was updated. We've added the ability to capture a 4th regulatory agreement on your project. Some of our projects are getting more than one funding source from HCD, sometimes even 4, and so we've had to add a 4th regulatory agreement contract number in there. We've added the city field. We've added a second sponsor name, and so what we're asking for sponsor is who controls your project. It's pretty much the UMR 8301. It's the Uniform Multifamily Regulations that HCD is our kind of our uniform regulations. We have a definition of sponsor in there. It's really who controls the borrower or the owner of the project. If it's a special purpose entity, you'd want to look at UMR section 8313.2 and provide, if the sponsor's a special purpose entity, provide who controls that special purpose entity. We changed this field from management agent to property management to better communicate that we're looking for the property manager on the project. We've added the total units field. In row 16 here, we've added a couple different programs. We've added the HLCP, which is the Housing Loan Conversion Program, and then the California Housing Accelerator Program in this list. As you select yes here, this activates cells A17 through A19 and turns those on. Because we've added the LPR field, the PRP, and some of these others. I also spelled these acronyms out on the form so you can better understand, which programs are what. This one we had to use a cell comment so you can see what these acronyms mean here in row 16, what the program names, the acronyms, really is spelled out. Another change that we made was we're requiring that you submit the utility allowance chart for your project. That's in section C and D. D is for additional utility allowances in case your project has different utility allowances. And then down here for this RHCP and FHDP area, I've changed this from fill in cells to auto-populate cells. These purple cells here, those are auto-populate, so you no longer have to enter data in those cells. And then, so that's pretty much worksheet 1, except for we've added in row 69 some areas for HCD use only that captures any out of compliance issues regarding negative points. Negative points impact your entity's ability to maybe compete for additional future funding. Worksheet 2, in column D, we've always had the shading for under occupancy, which is in bright yellow. And if you see any bright yellow shading on this worksheet 2, look in the cell comments. It will give you instructions on why it's yellow shaded. But we've also indicated for FHDP and RHCP units, if the unit is out of compliance because of over occupancy. On those programs, there is over occupancy restrictions or occupancy restrictions that come into play when you have too many persons in the household for the unit size. We've added functionality for LPR and PRP rents in column K and AM and AN. So, as Joanna said, as additional programs come out, we may have to make enhancements to the form or revisions to the form to incorporate, the new programs. The other thing that we have in the form is that we shade when you have more than one funding source or however many funding sources, it shades the most restrictive income and rent limit for the unit. So in this case, 80,000 is less than 125. So that's shaded. And for the rent limit, 2921 is less than 3634. So these would be the applicable income and rent limits for your project. And I think that's it. And I thank you for joining us this afternoon. I'm going to turn it over to Van.
Great. Thank you, George. With that, I'll go ahead and begin the explanation and how to obtain the most recent, most recent updated SRI on our website. Go ahead and share my screen real quick. Again. All right. So when you get to this page, you want to make sure that you go ahead and access hcd.ca.gov to obtain the most recent forms for all your reporting needs. Okay, this is our main webpage right here. When you land on this page, move your mouse over the grants and funding hyperlink, then move it on down to the reporting and compliance loan programs. Select that option, and that hyperlink will bring you to this particular page. And as I've mentioned earlier, this page houses all the forms that will be needed for your compliance for all the programs at the department. Okay. Today we're going to be talking about the scheduled rental income, and it is actually right here for you to download. Please ensure that you update and download the most updated form, and that's exactly where you're going to find it. Currently, we have the update being September 4th, 2024. As you see here, you can see that is basically the update date right there. So please make sure that you download that form. Once you've downloaded the form, there is another step that you need to make sure you do to unlock the macros to have it working. Okay, I can show you that right here. Once we go to the downloaded, this is the 5th version that I've downloaded today. So we want to go ahead and right click, excuse me, and then go to properties. Once you get to this page, this prompt pops up. You want to take a look at the bottom part right here for security. And you want to select unblock, apply, and that will unlock all the macros to allow the form to work properly and all the information that's required to be open to you. Okay, so that's the SRI that we have here. I'm going to enable editing to allow me to enter information. Okay, macros, everything's clear. And so this is the consolidated SRI. This is the 5th version I've downloaded today. This is basically the start tab and the start form for you to enter the information for your particular loan program or project. Please be aware that there are actually instructions here for your use and to make sure that you are actually entering the correct information in the format that's required, okay? I'm just going to run it down real quick. That step that I had previously completed is also detailed here. And again, I can't stress enough how much that we need to make sure that you unlock that and allow it to work properly. Going back to our certification and checklist. Okay. The SRI is defaulted at one loan program. Currently, we do have a lot of programs that actually have layered funding, so be sure to understand how many how many programs you have at your project, that being 1 through 4. If you do have that many, please select 4 and then enter the contract number accordingly. Right. Please ensure that you have the correct project name, ABC project. Enter that information there, and depending on the contract, please enter the contract number here as well. We're taking back down to one program. Easier explanation. George has added this city prompt in this field, so make sure you enter that information. It doesn't affect the form if you put in the wrong city. However, if you select the wrong county based upon the drop down, then it will provide the wrong income limits and rent limits. So please make sure you select the correct one. Example, Sacramento. You can put in Sacramento, Oak Grove, right? And it'll show you the rents for Sacramento County. You want to make sure you enter the proper sponsor name / borrower. If there's a second sponsor, enter that information here. If your property is currently being managed by a property management company, please enter that information here. This allows us to understand exactly who we're going to be working with, because information is very specific and we want to make sure that we have the right people that we're talking to. And we just don't want to talk to anybody regarding the projects itself. Please also enter the person who's prepared this particular SRI's names here. Ensure that the phone number is active and included so that if we do have any questions, we can give you a call, as opposed to sending an email that can sit in the email box for 5-10 days. Okay. Make sure that you select the correct reporting period. This one is set at 2025. If you're reporting for 2024 or any previous years, you're welcome to select those accordingly. Please use the drop-down to select the correct reporting period. There's a few options for you here. For the most part, it's going to be January 1st to December 31st for the regular calendar year, which means your SRI would be due November 1st for us to review and approve. Some projects actually have a fiscal year reporting period, which is July 1st to June 30th. That makes the SRI due May 1st. 60 days in advance of the reporting period. It's very important that you include the total number of units here in the project. This is not just basically our HCD units, but it's also the total units for non-assisted, or total number for non-assisted units as well. Okay, and that's just a numerical number. The next section, the funding at the project, you want to make sure you select the corresponding loan programs that apply for this particular project. If there's more than one, you can select the ones that apply. Let's just say that there's 2 at this particular property, okay? But those 2 can be, let's just say, for example, HSC and home. Well, you only have to select from the drop-down, yes, for that one. Ensure that you select all that apply, and if it doesn't apply, or if there's no loan for that particular property, then you must select no, because if you don't, it may affect the form working properly. Okay, let me go ahead and do that for us so you can see. And let's just say this particular property had more than one loan, and then you select yes for the 2 that apply. Although I didn't enter an RA number, you'll see, based upon what I've selected, drop downs will open up to the corresponding loan type. Okay. This question's for, excuse me, this part right here is just to answer Pam's question a little bit earlier. She wondered why the utility allowance did not show up. You got to make sure that you unlock the form first, right? And select the proper program that you're trying to complete for. I believe you were looking to complete the RACP. So if you do so, just select yes here. And then the information, the utility allowance chart should open up for you to enter information. I hope that helps. Now, what's new this year, and George has mentioned a little bit earlier, is that when you select an MHP-like type of program and you select yes, the information that usually pops up related to the certificate of occupancy and the gross rent floor, that information is now on the second tab, not tab 2, but on the MHP family-like or family income and rent limits tab. That information can be located here. All right. We'll be able to go over, I think we went over that in the first session. Katie will actually have something that will touch on this once again. I plan to share a project that will have RCP and TERP-R in there. So I won't be using this particular tab. Okay. Moving down, please ensure that you have the correct utility allowance. And as a reminder, you will only have a utility allowance requirement and documentation requirement if your tenants actually pay their utilities themselves and it's not owner paid. And if the tenants do pay, then make sure that you submit the proper updated utility allowances for that particular property, county, city, okay? If there are multiple utility allowances based upon the, let's say, multiple buildings that were completed and placed in service, then you want to make sure you enter the corresponding utility allowances for that particular building here. If you have questions about this, please be sure to contact your occupancy rep and they'll be able to walk you through this. The checklist of required items, this is something of a check for you guys to make sure that you have all the necessary information entered and submitted to us properly. It is a drop down. If it's completed, just select completed. If it's in process, select in process. And if it's not, then select no. But if you select no, and there's a reason why you selected no, please provide that information to us here. A comment just to give us a little bit more information so that we can understand why that information or why that was not completed for us. Okay. Moving down to the certifier type. This is what a drop down as well. You can select it accordingly. You can be either you are the certifier as the you're certifying as a borrower, the sponsor, or the management agent of contract. You want to make sure you enter your name here. And as well as the title. Also, more importantly, you want to make sure you enter the certification date because this greatly affects the income certification date here. As you may already know, HCD requires that you certify your tenant's income annually. And if this is not inputted correctly, then the dates that you enter here will not be recognized properly. Again, please have a phone number so that we can reach you directly and an email so that we can reach out to you should we have any questions and clarifications needed. Anything in green is left for HCD to complete. The one section that I want to make sure that everybody understands and pays attention to is the HCD comments section. This is where we're going to leave you notes and instructions to follow up the approved or non-approved SRI. This could be related to providing additional information, verifying certifications, providing occupancy standards checklist forms, or anything that can be related to negative points policy issues, okay? So it's very, very important for you to read this part right here and communicate with us and allow us to provide additional instructions there. Moving on to the MHP form. This part right here, I'm going to allow Katie to complete and share additional information. I want to go ahead and move on to the assisted and restricted units and go over each column. As you can understand, most of it's very self-explanatory, but I also want to go ahead and touch base and make sure that it's in the correct format. Column A, this would be the unit number as it pertains to the project, as it pertains to your particular tenants. Okay, you want to make sure you enter all the assisted and restricted units. This includes TCAC, as Tina has mentioned in the previous session. You want to make sure that to identify if this particular tenant or unit is a manager's unit by selecting the drop-down X. Household ID. This is the unique information that is attributed to this particular tenant. Please do not use the tenant's name nor their social security number. It's best to use some sort of unique code or number or series of numbers to identify that particular tenant. If we receive SRIs that have the tenant's names, we will have to return it and request that it be changed, because this is very personal information that we don't want to hold on to. The next column is the number of persons in the household, very self-explanatory, but please use the drop down. Column E is the unit size. This goes from the group home 0, which is an SRO, up to 5 units. We have the move-in date, very self-explanatory. Just go ahead and put it in a date with 4 slashes. And then you have the household income recertification date. As I've mentioned earlier, HCD requires that you recertify your tenants annually. That means you want to make sure that you recertify the tenant's income and collect that information and have it available upon request and during site visits as well. Annual household, once you get that information, please enter the amount here. Enter the tenant's the current monthly tenant rent here. And this column J, does provide a little, does require a little more explanation. Okay, it has a drop down from a selection from 0 to 12. I can explain this a little bit more in detail a little bit later, but I want to just give you a quick, or I just want to touch on it really quick. This is the number of months that you're looking to have the tenant's rent remain the same during the reporting period. As an example, if you're hoping to increase the tenant's rents in February, then you want to select 1, which means you're going to charge the tenant's current rent for 1 more month in the reporting period of this time right here that you've mentioned, right? So let's just say, for a better example, January to December is your reporting period. You want to charge, you're planning on charging January's rent at the current rent, and then from February on, you would be charging the higher rent that you're proposing. If you're not looking to increase the rents at all during that reporting period of January to December, you would select 12. And conversely, if you're looking to change the tenant's rent immediately upon the reporting period of January 1st, then you would select 0. For MHP-like and programs in that family, you don't have to put information here of the current approved rents, because we have the current limits already. However, for the legacy programs, for which I'm going to be introducing or explaining a little bit later, you will need to provide the tenant's current approved rents here. For columns L through O, this is information that you must provide should it apply. If the particular tenant is elderly, please just basically use the drop down and select the X. If they're a veteran, if they're a part of the FHDP loan program, or if they're an agricultural worker, please use the drop down. The following 3 columns has to do with accessible units and the types of accessible units. We want to make sure that we report this correctly. And currently we have 2 types of accessible units, one being mobility and the other being sensory. You can select one of either or both or neither. By doing so, you want to make sure that you correct, select the proper one. If it's neither, just go ahead and select NA for if the occupant's actually using that particular unit as a mobility unit or sensory unit. If it's neither, then it doesn't apply. So just select NA. However, if they're using it, if it is a mobility unit and they're not using it for a mobility unit, then you want to select no. And if they don't, if they're not using it as a mobility unit, we want to be sure that the current tenants are aware that they may need to be relocated should a request or a requirement or a mobility unit be required. So you want to make sure that there is some sort of documentation on file that clearly states that they understand. So you would want to select yes. Now, if you select no, that means the tenant is not using it as a mobility unit and has not agreed to move upon requirement or upon the need, then this is going to be an issue for us. So we need to make sure that the tenant is aware. So please make sure that you follow those directions accordingly. If we see it where it's no and NA, we're going to ask you about it. If it's both, then select both, and same instructions for it being utilized as such. And if it's not being utilized, then the tenant has to be aware and sign off and move upon requirement or upon the need. Okay. Moving on to the next section. This would have to do with the type of funding. So depending on the program that you're selected and the program that you have for the particular project, you would select the loan program and the acronyms accordingly. HSC, home, or it could be any other type. Just select the ones that actually apply. Katie will actually go over one with LPR a little bit later, and she'll be able to show you a little bit more. Now, once you selected the correct program, you want to also select the corresponding AMI levels that apply. Okay? And it can vary from program to program. Let's just say this one is a home, and that one happens to be TCAC as well. You can select TCAC, and you can select 45, and this form is used to allow us reps as well as you guys to select the one that is most restrictive and charge the rents accordingly. Okay. Anything in white self-populates, is generated and by the macros that are put in place. One of the most important columns that you're going to be dealing with is the AS column, which is the proposed new monthly tenant rent. This is the rent that you're hoping or requesting to charge the tenants in the next reporting period. Please enter the information here. It's a numerical value. Just if you're looking to charge them, let's just say $1,500, enter that information here. Column AR will show the changes based upon what they're currently paying. And if there's anything that's overcharged, meaning higher than what's allowable, that information will highlight yellow, and it'll allow us to know that there's an issue there and that will need to be explained. We will go into detail exactly how to deal with this in the next example. You also want to make sure that you enter the current rent subsidy if the tenant is receiving any. That's a numerical value here. Go ahead and enter that information. If there's any new type of subsidy that's being received, enter that information as well. You can see that it highlights to let you know that there's the information that needs to be entered here. So if it's the same, enter that same information there. If it's different, you can do that as well. Please also select the type of subsidy source. It can be a project-based or tenant-based. So just select the one that applies. Okay. And once all this information is entered, we'll be able to select, just click this button and allow for the approval. You can see how depending on the type of subsidy and the type of payments, that the highlight goes away. It's all worked into this form by George, and it allows us to review the form a little bit faster and get the approvals back to you as soon as possible. Moving on to the next section. If there's any type of information that requires explanation or anything that highlights yellow, we're going to need an explanation. Please be as specific and detailed as possible. One of the issues that we run into is under-occupied units. If there's an under-occupied unit, you want to make sure that you describe the type of under-occupancy If there's three people or 3 persons in a 3-bedroom unit, please provide the information as to why that's the case. Don't just say occupancy standards checks form is on file. Okay. And for those who are not aware, if there are any type of standards exceptions that you're requesting, please make sure you fill this out and send it back to us. You want to make sure you do this before you bring in a new tenant, and make sure that they qualify accordingly. Because if we find that the particular tenant that you're moving in is not qualified, it's going to cause a lot of trouble for us both. Okay, and we may require that you move the tenant out of the property and house the correct family size. Okay. And going on to the non-restricted units. This form is saved for non-assisted units being market or units that are not assisted by us or TCAC. Okay. If there is a manager's unit, you want us to go ahead and enter the number of managers used here. You don't, if there's a corresponding value that is attributed to that particular unit, have that information entered here as well. An example of such is here, line 6331. On the proposed approved operating budget, that is, the approved operating budget shows that there's an amount. So you take this amount and divide it by 12, and you can enter that information here. It should correspond correctly. Next, we have the the pivot table that compiles the unit mix for this particular property. It'll help you double check the unit mix and verify that you have the correct amount of units that are required based upon the regulatory agreement. I will be able to go over an example of this in the next, CHIRP and RCP example. Okay. And this is the same exact table. All right, that's the blank one. Next, I'd actually like to go ahead and move right straight into the CHIRP and CERP example. Excuse me. I just need a little bit of water. Okay. So we're moving straight into the legacy program. Okay. The example I've used here is actually a CHIRP and CERP program, both into one. This actually doesn't exist. This is something that we've made up, but I wanted to be able to show the computations and how you're going to be able to fill this form out. Okay. So as you can see, I've selected 2 for the number of units, or its number of programs here. We have a RCP as well as a CHIRP-R in the city of Oak Grove, located in the county of Sacramento. Again, please make sure that you select the drop down and the corresponding county for your particular project. Excuse me. The example I'm using is ABC borrower, just information. Please enter that information, the property management company. Sorry, my spelling's pretty bad. And then you have the compliance person who's going to be filling this form out. Their contact phone number, should I have a question or my reps have a question. Fiscal year 2025, and the reporting period is January 1st to December 31st. There's a total of 124 units at this particular property I'm using as an example. I've selected the box accordingly. This one, I've selected no, but if I were to select yes, the other boxes that are will be the LPR and PRP. But in this case, it's not. And when I select that, those particular programs will not be open for us to make any type of edits. As I've mentioned earlier, I've selected 2 different programs, RCP as well as CHIRP-R. So I've got to make sure that I've selected yes for each of these. Now, this as I said earlier, particular program does not exist where you'll have actually an RCP funding and a CHIRP-R funding. Okay, so if I were to select no, and I want to make sure I go through this slowly, you can see that none of the corresponding boxes are made available for me to enter information. I'm going to go over RCP bond first, and I'm going to select yes so that the windows are opened up for us. Okay. So once I've done that, selected the RCP bond, the utility allowance chart, as well as the rent adjustment factor calculation tables are open. Okay. The utility allowance chart, we want to make sure that we have the correct information that's corresponding to this particular property. And as required, based upon the memo by Lindy in 2019, all utility charts and amounts and allowances must be documented and evidenced accordingly. And these are the different ways by which you can do so. In this example, we have 3 different unit types, okay? 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, and 3 bedroom. And the utility allowances for the corresponding amounts, I did not have that up for you, but I believe Katie will have one to share. And just to make sure that we go on to the rent adjustment factor, I want to be able to share this information, and this is very important, and I'm going to try my best to go slow to allow everybody to understand how to fill out this part. If this is not filled out properly, you will not get the correct rent adjustment factor, thereby not allowed to get the rent amounts approved, okay? This particular example, we have 38 units that are related to the regulatory agreement in Exhibit B, okay? Tina and Katie has Tina has showed you one, and Katie will show you where to find that information in the regulatory agreement. However, there's a total of 124 units at the particular property. 38 of them is assisted by HCD. So we want to make sure we have the correct percentages. And as you can see, the proration percentage assisted to total units is 30.65, and that calculates automatically. Here's what we need to do first. We need to make sure that we understand what the approved replacement reserve deposit amount is based upon AMC 175. And that's the HCD approved cash flow, line 34, column H. I'm going to say that again. AMC 175. That's this particular form right here. And as you can see, that's the HCD approved cash flow analysis. It's the approved one. Going back, we want to make sure we get line 34, column H. Okay, line 34, column H. 34, replacement reserve deposit, line 34, column H. That's this one right here. That's the total, so it's 49,600. We take this number and we place it here, 49,600, right? The next line we want to use is the total cost of operations for 2024 in AMC 175 again. So it's line 25, column H, okay? Line 25, column H. Give me 1 second. This one. Line 25, column H. That again, 25, column H. 1035749. 1035749. Okay. And then you want to go, excuse me, that information there. And then so this particular CPI factor for the 2025 year is 4.6. Okay. This will give us the total cost of operations here, approved required reserves here. And then the next information that the next number that you want to make sure you enter is the total revenue. And that again, you're going to go back to AMC 175 again, line 24, column B. Okay. Line 24, column B. Okay, you only want to deal with the assisted units. It's 303,397. 303,397. So once you've added all the property information, number of units that are assisted, total number of units, excuse me, the replacement reserves requirements, cost of operations, as well as the approved total revenue for assisted units, you'll get the rent adjustment factor of 5.04. So what does that actually mean? So 5.04, based upon what the tenant's paying right now, is the amount that you can actually increase the following year. let's just say, for example, the tenant is currently paying $100 this year. In the reporting period, you want to increase the tenant's rent, max out at 504, it'll be $105. Okay? So the following year's rent for every $100 they're paying this year would be 105 the following year. As George mentioned, it's very important that you pay attention to the proposed rent revenue and the proposed tenant assistance, because this makes a difference for the following year's rent as well. We have the borrower's information selected, that the borrower is actually filling out this form. Susie, the supervisor from ABC Accountant, and they certified on this date. Now, this date, as I've mentioned earlier, is very important. If you don't have a date here, you're not going to be able to, we're not going to be able to verify that this was not certified in a timely manner. See? If I were to say delete this, that certification issue is gone away. So myself and my reps, we take the time out to make sure that this information is actually certified properly and in a timely manner. And if it isn't, this will happen. Okay? As I mentioned a little bit earlier, again, phone number, email address, and anything in green is left for HCD to complete. Please, please, please pay attention to HCD comments here once you receive the approval or issues with it. This way you can always follow our instructions and make sure that everything that's required from you is inputted here, is completed as well. Because if there's issues that are left uncured, you may be subject to negative points being levied against you, and that can hurt future funding for your group and your organization. Okay. As mentioned, this is not an MHP loan. So when you select no, we don't have an MHP tab that pops up. This is, however, a legacy program. So we want to make sure we select that and that this pops up. Now, I actually want to go ahead and move on to the Chirp R example as well while we're at it. I'm going to select no here, and that removes the rent adjustment factor for the RCP. And I'm going to select yes for Chirp R. And in doing so, a different window opens up. Okay, so as I've mentioned, this example, you can see it's going to require the same type of information. The CPI used here, this, for the most part, we only have what, one SARA program, one SARA project left that we're working with. So for the most part, you won't be dealing with this. It's either 100 or 50%. If you have a question about that, please reach out to your occupancy representative, and he or she will be able to help you. The CPI is still 4.6. And I want to make sure that we go through this slowly once again. Now, this has to do with the Chirp R and the rent adjustment factor there. Okay, the required information that needs to be input is the total cost of operation before depreciation. Now, we're talking about just residential area only, okay? And this is line 25, B plus D. I'm going to go over to the same approved cash flow analysis, line 25, B plus D, and that's 1035. Okay, so I'm going to enter that information here, 1035. I'm going to put in the approved required replacement and operating reserves deposit, residential only. That's lines 34 and 35, B and D. However, this particular property doesn't have that, right? It just has line 30, 34 and 35. We did not approve it, so we can't enter that information. Let's just say, for example, this was entered and we did approve it, then there would be an amount here. We would add that together. However, in this particular example, we're just going to use 49,600 for simplicity. Okay, enter that information here. And then we also want to enter the total revenue based upon the approved cash flow of AMC 175 again, and that's line 24, columns B plus D. Put that over here. Line 24, columns B and D. Okay, excuse me. B and D, and that would be 1449791. Okay. And I'm sorry I didn't highlight that earlier, but that's the amount here. 1449791. And the rent adjustment factor for this particular project is 3.14. Why is it different from the rent adjustment factor for the RCP bond? The formula by which they obtain the rent adjustment factors are actually different. So you want to make sure that you pay attention to the correct inputs here, here, and here, and then you'll receive the correct SRI rent adjustment factor. This is actually a very good example for me to share because this form will actually restrict it to the most restrictive rent increase, restrictive amounts on the particular project. So if this project actually existed, the rent adjustment factor would only be 3.14 and not 5.04. Moving on to the assisted tab. Okay. Column A, as again, very simple, self-explanatory, just the unit number. Column B, if it happens to be a manager's unit, please enter that information. So this was selected as a drop down, so X was selected, so that particular unit number 39 is a manager's unit. Now you can see the household ID here, right? They're all the same. This is not acceptable. We would tell the person who filled this form out to go back and make sure you enter the unique household ID. As a reminder, if there's any parts of this or any fields that you're not aware of or unfamiliar with, there are prompts that will help you here, as well as these red flags that will give you a better idea of exactly what's required there. Okay, so please look to those for help. And if you can't figure that out, you can always reach out to your occupancy rep, and we'll be able to help you and explain exactly what's the issue and possibly get us past that. Okay, you can see a bunch of highlights, but this one in particular is a 2-person household living in a 3-bedroom unit. That shouldn't be the case, but it may very well happen. So we want to make sure that you provide information and describe the reasons why. See, this person in particular has a reasonable accommodation, which is fantastic. We want to also make sure we understand that what that reasonable accommodation is. You don't necessarily have to go into detail. Sometimes it's for additional medical equipment, right? Or any other reason. We just want to make sure that we note that there. Moving on to the next one. If it's a vacant unit, just make sure you select vacant. This makes life a little bit easier so that we know exactly which units we want to look for, okay? Moving on, this is the move-in date. That's very self-explanatory. And this, again, is the recertification date on column G. It's highlighted in 2 spots because these 2 particular tenants have not completed their recertification information. Even though there's income here and it looks like they qualify, but this recertification is beyond 12 months from the certification of when it was submitted. Okay, now let's just say it was recertified in September 1 of 2024, then we're good. It's less than 12 months. All right, this one, no, this one's way overdue, so it needs to be recertified. Please be aware your occupancy rep may kick this back to you and not approve it if your recertifications are not done in a timely manner. This is the only way we can make sure that the tenants that have applied and currently reside at the properties continue to qualify to stay there. If there's any issues or any questions with that requirement, please reach out to occupancy rep or manager. Okay. The household income here. Once you select the number of persons and the unit type, and the recertifications that are done, this one, it shows that it's actually this family's over income, making $250,000 a year for a family of 4. And in Sacramento County, the limit is $58,950 based upon these requirements and programs. So this is the RHCP program, and the very low income designation limit is only $58,950. However, if it's CHIRP and it's low income, then it's $94,300. Okay, but because RHCP bond is more restrictive at the very low amount, or limit, then this is what would apply, and this tenant would actually be over income. Nonetheless, it would be over income anyways at the low, okay? Currently, we have 670. 670 is the current rent, and that's what was approved last year. In this situation right here, in the first tenant, the approved rent amount was only 600, but they're currently charged 641. So as you can see, it's highlighted yellow, saying that, hey, there's a problem here. You're charging more than this particular tenant was approved for, or this particular unit was approved for. So this is something that we want to make sure that we address. There may be a situation where it is just a typo, or if it's in fact being overcharged, you may have to reimburse the tenants based upon how much it was overcharged, okay? Moving on, here you'll see the different numbers, the corresponding numbers. This has a 9. What that basically says is the tenant wants, or excuse me, the sponsor would like to charge the tenant $641 for an additional 9 months, and then increase the rents afterwards, right? And again, I think we've already talked about the accessibility of the units. I'll go ahead and move on to that. RCP, you want to make sure you select the corresponding programs that apply and the corresponding levels, okay? For legacy programs, we have very low and low, and there are actually AMI levels that correspond to percentages as well. Okay, again, everything in white is self-populated, so you don't have to enter any information. You want to take a look at the column AR and AS. So AR basically, or excuse me, AS is the column where you want to enter the information. If you want to enter something that would allow for, excuse me, that is allowable, then you enter that amount in there. If it isn't allowable, or if it's over the limit, then it'll highlight yellow, and then you will make sure that you have to provide that information as to why that's the case. Okay. Please enter the subsidies. If you don't have the subsidies entered and the type, it'll highlight yellow again. Now, all the information is entered, and I've selected and approved this SRI. However, as you can see, the SRI will only approve up to the max. This one, so you said you wanted 400, that would work. 670, you requested 670, it won't work because the max is 550, okay? And again, this is only if the tenant doesn't pay a utility, or does you pay a utility. You want to make sure that you have that information in here as well. Okay. And again, I can't stress enough how important it is for you to explain the compliance issues for us. That's the only way we will make sure that the highlighted parts can be addressed. Non-restricted units, as I've mentioned earlier, the first tab, it showed 124 units with only 38 units being assisted. So the remainder is non-assisted. You just want to enter the average amounts based upon the unit types, okay? So if there's 33 one-bedroom units, and the rents may vary, but the average, you add it all together, whatever the rent total is, and divide it by 33, and then that would give us the total revenue that's received. If there's a manager's unit here, enter that information. If there's a value, as I've mentioned earlier, this one has 2,940. There's one manager's unit. The corresponding value that is attributed to an administrative rent fee unit is 35,000. Divide that by 12 would get you that amount. Okay. And moving on, the pivot table. Again, this will help you determine if you actually select the correct or have the correct unit mix by right-clicking this table, this field right here, and selecting refresh. It'll give you the amount and the unit mix. There you go. And the same thing with this particular program, Chirpar, as well. Okay, and I know that was a little bit longer, but it's very important that I stress how you completed that form. And if you have any additional questions, the occupancy rep for the legacy program should be able to assist you with that. And with that, I'd like to be able to throw it over to Katie, who will be introducing the LPR and a little bit more information about the PRP.
Thanks, Van. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay.
It's
So-
coming up.
I'm going to be going over the loan portfolio restructuring SRI, which is the LPR SRI.
Not quite yet, Katie. Just one
Okay.
second. You may have selected.
Let me make sure I share the right thing.
It's
Okay.
good now.
So this SRI is a little bit more complex because it pertains to a program that has created a transaction on a property that has like legacy funding. So the main point I want to make on tab 1 for any LPR project is that when you enter your regulatory agreement number, you want to be sure to use the LPR contract number. You do not want to use your pre-existing contract number from your original funding. As Van mentioned in his review, you want to make sure that you complete the project name, city, county, and all of the contact information, as well as the correct fiscal year, report period, and total units. For any LPR program, you want to be sure to select that it is yes in the MHP family in this top bold box. And you also need to select yes for the LPR checkbox. If your project has no other funding other than LPR, these are the only 2 boxes you will check yes, and all the others will be checked no. For this particular example, we're going over a scattered site project, which is a project that has 2 separate buildings or 2 separate addresses. So you'll see in the example here that we have 2 different utility allowance schedules. In this example, I'm going to show you a utility allowance schedule. This one actually would be rejected, although it is the current schedule, it's for the correct county. This example has no circled or highlighted amounts, and the borrower has not totaled out the amounts in the margins for us, so we wouldn't be able to properly assess if they've calculated the utility allowances correctly. I also want to stress, like Van mentioned earlier, this will only apply if your tenants pay utility amounts. Down below in the checklist section, you want to make sure to check completed and yes if those pertain to it. If you are going to check no for any of them, you do need to explain in the comment section below for any compliance issues. Again, I just want to, make sure that the certification is completed, that this is filled out by the sponsor, the borrower, or the management agent, and the contact information provided is correct and current. When you get your SRI back from your rep, you do need to make sure and check the approval comments section down below so that you can address any kinds of compliance issues that need to be taken care of. On the MHP Family Income and Rent Limit tab, as Van mentioned earlier, you do need to enter the placed in service date and the gross rent floor date. These come from documentation. Either in this list, it'll tell you what kinds of documentation are allowed if you have a tax credit project, or what kinds of documentation are allowed if you have a non-tax credit project. So for this example, they're stating that they have an IRS 8609. This is what that form looks like. It is a little bit blurry, I'm sorry, but the placed in service date is right here on line 5 typically. So that's the date that would be put in the form here. This project also has a placed in service date, or I'm sorry, a gross rent floor date of July 19th, 2017. And they state that it's from their tax credit project staff report. And I'm sorry, I don't have that open, but it's actually the date of the letter that it came from TCAC. Okay, so when you're double checking to make sure that all of this has been entered correctly, you need to go to your income and rent limit charts to make sure you don't see any errors. If you see any errors, it will alert you to go back and check that you've entered all of your information correctly. Moving on to tab 2, with a scattered site project, it's really important that when you list the unit number, that you tell us the difference between the first building and the second building. So in this example, the sponsor has told us that anything with B asterisk is the first building. Anything without B asterisk is going to be the second building. And that tells the form the utility allowance amounts that should be charged. Okay. Again, we can see here that the sponsors use the correct household IDs, that they're not using any kind of personal identification number for the tenant that would compromise their security. They're not using their name. They've used complete household ID numbers. And we can see that they've also inputted all accurate information, but do unfortunately have a couple of yellow highlighted cells showing compliance issues. So in this case, these tenants and households are going to be over income. That would be an issue that we would need to address by making notes in that approval comment cell on tab 1. For the LPR program, assisted units will either be designated as LPR or MHP. So when you're working on your SRI, you need to decide what tenants are LPR or existing households based on their actual move-in date. So it's very important for you to track the move-in date of the household. If the household transfers units, you still use their original move-in date in column F, and you still continue to use their original household ID. So for this project in particular, we can find their date of application approval, which is October 19th of 2017. And that's going to be the date that decides who is an existing tenant and who is a new tenant. Anybody who moved in prior to that date will be designated as LPR. Anybody who moved in after that date will be designated as MHP. Okay. For LPR projects, any LPR project, there's only 2 AMI designations. Okay. They're made based on their actual income. So if the household's actual income falls below the 35% AMI limit, they will be designated at 35% AMI. For an existing household designated LPR, if their income is over the 35% AMI limit, they're designated at 60% AMI. So you will only have 35% or 60% AMI designations for your existing households always. When you're trying to designate your new households, you're going to want to go to your regulatory agreement, Exhibit B. Some of our older LPR regulatory agreements only have one unit mix chart, and in that case, you're going to use that chart. But if you have a newer LPR regulatory agreement, you might have 2 tables, in which case you'll use unit mix table 2. So you can see here that our new households designated MHP will either be 35% or 60%. So this makes it pretty easy for this sponsor. They're only going to designate households at 35% or 60%. Okay. It's important to note that until all of your households move out and you have no existing households that resided in the project prior to that date of application acceptance, until that happens, your unit mix table will never look like this. This is a projection. This is like future state. Okay, so when you come over to unit mix design tab and you see that it looks nothing like your unit mix chart, that's okay. So don't worry about that. It's also very important to note that LPR tenants can never be over income. The existing households are never over income. Their income is grandfathered in. If they're over 60% AMI, it is what it is. We can't do anything about that at this point. I want to make a quick note here that this is where PRP differentiates from LPR. So if you have a PRP project, which is our portfolio restructuring program, there are limitations for over income households. Okay, so your PRP rep may tell you that you have to charge a certain rent based on them being over income. Moving on. Over here, you can see that we have green highlights in column AE. Okay, and then we also have yellow highlights in proposed tenant rent. So the green highlights are going to tell us the acceptable rent amounts. The yellow highlights are going to tell us if there's a request being made that's over the limit, that's over the acceptable amount. For our existing households only, not new households, for existing households, you cannot charge over 50% of their income in rent. Okay, so anytime you see an LPR designated household that is paying over 50% in rent, we're not going to ask you to reduce it. We won't ask you to pay it back, but we are going to ask you to freeze their rent and make no more increases until their income goes up or until they vacate that unit. The other thing I do want to mention before I go off of this tab in particular is the LPR target rents. Okay, so you'll see that we've entered target rents for the units that are designated LPR. You'll only see them on the existing households. Okay, this is kind of a complex thing that HCD will do for you. You don't ever need to worry about entering something in this column for yourself. But basically what we're doing is taking existing households and targeting their current rent to reach a certain amount. And once they reach that amount, then they can be treated as MHP, where their rent can be increased up to the limit. Moving on to tab, well, first, real quick, I just want to make a quick comment as well. Please be sure to note any other compliance issues in the comments section. If you have an underoccupied unit, please note the reason for the reasonable accommodation or that the tenant is on a transfer list, because we will be taking a look at that when we come out to do site visits. Tab 3, this project in particular is scattered site. So they have 2 manager units, 1 at each site, and they've properly entered the information here. And then again, you can see we're going to refresh. And you can see that we have some MHP units, which, like I said earlier, these are our new tenants that have moved in after the date of application acceptance. And then we have our LPR tenants who have moved in prior to the date of application acceptance. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. I know LPR can be complex and scary, but if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them.
Great, thank you, Katie. With that, I'll go ahead and take over again. Much appreciated for the explanation for LPR. I know it's a little difficult and it's very complex. So as Katie has mentioned, if you do have any questions, please reach out to your occupancy rep and we'll do our best to help you out in completing that form. Now, we want to go ahead and basically move on forward to some common sponsor and user errors that we see. And most likely, these are the issues that come through that you can actually look to fix yourselves. One of the major issues that we actually see is the copy and pasting. George has done his best to prevent you from copying and pasting just the format itself, but only allowing you to copy and paste values. Okay. And when transferring the data from, say, the previous SRI to the newest one. Another issue that we usually see is you're not selecting the correct number of regulatory agreements in the first tab, which is cell G5. Please select the correct corresponding number of programs that apply to your particular project. If you have a CHIRP R plus an MHP plus a HSC plus an ACC, that's 4. You want to make sure you go ahead and enter all 4 contract numbers into tab 1 of the SRI. You also want to make sure that you select the correct format when you're entering information. If it's a drop down, a yes or no, select the yes or no. And if it doesn't apply, select no. Okay. Entering and copying data cells that do not conform, meaning the format, if it's a number that's required or a date that's required, you can't enter a different type of formatted information. Okay. Then the household IDs. This is overlooked pretty often. It doesn't affect the form. However, it does affect how we can review and approve the particular SRI. You should never, again, never use the tenant's names or social security numbers when completing the SRI and the household ID. Please use a unique identifier so that we can go back and make sure that we have the correct information and the correct tenants when we are discussing them. And always download the most recent version of the form, SRI form, on our website, which can be located here. Please submit all SRIs and supporting documents to AMC branch at hcd.ca.gov. When you do so, it'll be filtered out and distributed to the correct rep for review and approved in a timely manner. If you send it directly to your rep, this may delay your approval, and it will be hard for us to keep track of what's been submitted and credited with regards to the time. Always provide utility allowances if the tenants actually pay utilities themselves. In the manager's unit, all assisted units have to be reported on tab 2. If it's not assisted, report it on tab 3. And if there's a value given to it, please enter that amount in tab 3. And the form does have a lot of lines or a lot of rows for you to enter information, but you also want to make sure that the comments and justify any type of discrepancies that are highlighted yellow. You can hide the unused ones by, hide the unused rows by selecting blank in cell A6. And as always, HCD rent increase approvals are subject to compliance with all other state, federal, and local laws. So it's your responsibility, your responsibility to know what those rules and laws are. And if you have any questions, as always, you can always reach out to your occupancy rep. With that being said, we're going to go ahead and have another question and answer session at this time. Please raise your hand, and then Sang will be able to unmute you for you to answer, or for you to pose any questions that you may have.
Nobody?
Okay, yeah,
Do we know who our
Stage is
HCD
open.
rep is?
okay. Actually, you know what? Let me go ahead and share that information with you. Give me 1 second here. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to print this. Okay. Share this one. Okay, here you go. This still needs to be updated, but based upon the program that you have, this is a list that was provided to you in the team's email that was sent out. Depending on the program that you have to complete, these are the different managers: myself, Masood, Carrie, and Desiree. You can reach out to your particular occupancy rep for help in anything with regards to your SRI or any type of occupancy questions. Okay. We also have a little bit more time left over. So should you have any questions, please reach out to us. I don't see any hands raised.
Wendy, if you have issues figuring out who your rep is, you can just reach out to one manager and tell them what projects you need to know the rep for, and they will direct you to the correct person for each project, because each project may have a different rep.
Okay, we
Okay, I
have
think
a
that's
few. Thanks, Van. We have a few more minutes, so if there's any other questions, feel free to ask. Otherwise, actually, I'm going to ask my team, the presenters, to turn on their camera just to show now that we are done with the presentations and we're not sharing any screens. And you'll see who Van Wyn is. I'm pretty sure everyone on this call knows who Van Wyn is, our program manager, and George Rodine, who's our senior specialist, Catherine Jones, our senior specialist, along with Tina Johnson and our CRP specialist, who is Jonathan. So as they try to turn off their cameras just to say hi to you all, I want to say thank you very much for joining us again. This is our annual SRI workshop for our sponsors, and hopefully we were able to get all your questions answered. And then, like I mentioned, if we did not get around to it, we will circle back. We'll have the recording available for you all, as well as sending out the questions and answers that you've put here into the chat for us, and you can reference back as well. But thank you so very much for joining us, and hopefully that was very helpful. That was Jonathan from our CRP team there that just popped in. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate you all and your continued hard work with working with HCD, getting your reports in as we prepare for the new season for 2025. Feel free to reach out to us and let us know if you have any questions, and we will assist you as best as we can. Thank you.
Have a good day, everybody.
Bye.